is a place I'm welcomed in. It's the mountains high, spread across a valley, green and wide. As morning filters through the trees, making in the day, reveals the canyon's magic deep inside. The sleepy sunrise brings the joy inside.
I was born in Santa Monica in December of 1943, and my parents were living in Topanga, so I can say that I'm a third-generation Topangan person. My grandparents were born and raised in England, and my grandmother, May Haney, lived in the Midlands of England, and her family was in the Pottery District. And my grandfather was on the Isle of Man. He came to California because his brother was here as a contractor in Santa Monica who made the streets and the sidewalks in Santa Monica. And I think to this day you can see his name, Neen, on some of the sidewalks. My grandmother was one of 12 children, and the story goes that her father was so oblivious that if he ran into one of his children on the street, he wouldn't recognize them. Well, I mean, I guess that's quite possible when you have 12 kids running around the house. But anyway, she came to California in 1900 and brought her brother because he had heart condition, and they thought that living in California would give him a better life. Grandparents met and they moved up to Topanga, and it was in about 1916, and you can imagine how it was to come to Topanga, dirt road, not very many people here. And Grandpa and Grandma bought this property on Topanga Canyon Boulevard. Grandpa, being in construction, he was quite talented in building things, and especially with stones. So he built a large stone house, and he also built tent cabins and other houses, and this became Neen's Camp, which was a resort of the time, and that was in the 1920s. Actually, it opened probably about 1918. People would come from Santa Monica and Los Angeles and the area and spend the summer in the tent cabins or the other little cabins, and they would have barbecues on the patio, and they would have dancing, and they would be in the big living room of the house and listen to the piano. So I guess it was quite an interesting life for them. Grandpa was the postmaster, well, or you're the mail person pickup. So he had a stage, which was a truck where he could go to Santa Monica and pick up people and the mail and bring it back to Topanga. Besides that, he built other things in the canyon which are recognizable. Up Entrada Road, there's a beautiful stone arch that he built. He built the walls in the state park. They're nice basalt stone walls. In Old Canyon, there's a water tank that looks like a milk bottle, and it's still there. You can go up Red Rock and you can see that. My mother went to UCLA, which was probably unusual in that day because it was the Depression, and that's where she met my dad. So she and Dad met in a botany class. My mother was interested in plants, and my dad was interested in plants, and so they married in 1938. Dad became a botany professor, and my mother taught 2 years in Topanga Elementary School. And the parents took on living in the property, the old Neen's Camp, and that's where I was raised along with my brother and my sister. The home growing up, it was a 2-story house and a nice big living room, which was quite cool. It had a big stone fireplace in it. The claim to fame on that house was that there was no indoor plumbing, but the bathrooms were outside. And why? Because when it was part of the camp, the bathrooms, of course, were used by some of the guests, and so they were attached to the house, but outside. When the earthquake came in 1994, the big one that did from Northridge, did a lot of damage, that family home was destroyed enough that it was unsafe to live in. And the property was sold to a local Topanga person, and he was able to take the house down and then rebuild it, and it looks exactly the same on the outside as it did when I was there, which was quite nice to see the house recreated. But they have indoor plumbing, so that's a nice change. The old school, as I call that one, Froggies, was quite an experience. So it was only maybe a quarter of a mile from my house. And to get there, in those days, mothers didn't drive the kids to school. We walked. And so we'd walk up the road north along Topanga Canyon Boulevard to the school, which is present-day Froggies. And sometimes if we wanted to have a little fun, we'd walk through the creek to get there. And there'd be a chain link fence between the creek and the school, and so we'd have to climb the fence, and then we'd get in there early so we could play kickball or softball or something of that sort. And it was quite a nice school. I was in the first class to have kindergarten at the school, and I'm sure my parents were instrumental in helping to get that in place. If you go to Froggies and you look down to the left, there's a bungalow that's still there. It's just a freestanding building. And that was my 4th grade class. And that was a favorite teacher, Mrs. Bruinslot. She was kind of like a little fire plug. She was a short woman and quite serious, and she had her hair up on top of her head in a bun, and she was very strict, and her passion was social studies. And so she had us recreate the missions, and we had learned some Spanish dances to go along with, and so it was a quite exciting classroom. While 4th grade ended, that was the end of my career at that school, because the new school came into effect. And that is the present-day elementary school, which is over 50 years old at this point. But in my mind, it's still the new school. My husband, Bruce Dickhoff, grew up in the San Gabriel Valley. He went to Monrovia High School. And we met at a UCLA extension class. When we first got married, we lived in Sherman Oaks. And then the house on Robinson Road, where we're presently living, came available. And so we moved up here to Topanga. Because I was born and raised here, I always had a soft spot in my heart for it. And to me, it's just a beautiful area. And where we live, the neighborhood couldn't be nicer. I think people really care about each other. We help each other out. We're good friends. And I really can't visualize living in the city where oftentimes you don't even know your neighbors. I think it's very important to take care of each other. One of my neighbors, an elderly gentleman, was having some health problems. And I was feeling that he probably wasn't eating so well. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if Meals on Wheels came up here? Well, lo and behold, that made it me starting Meals on Wheels here. Because of my work with TCEP, Topanga Coalition for Emergency Preparedness, I am active in preparing for disasters in Topanga. And in kind of in coordination with that was a county organization, well, it still meets, TEMP, Topanga Emergency Management Plan. The group that I happened to be with was interested in education, so we want to educate the people what to do in times of disaster. Well, the idea of maybe having a column to explain what some of these things came up, and I was kind of interested in that, so I invented the name Topanga Tim to be kind of an old guy with a cap who would sit on the mountain and he would give out advice. So for years and years, I wrote the column, which went into the Topanga Messenger. And it was really fun to do, but after writing over 100 columns, I decided that maybe it was time to pass it on to somebody else. I was the coordinator for the Red Cross shelter team. Now, if and when Topanga has a big disaster and is cut off from the rest of the world, which is quite possible because we don't have very many roads in and out, we, under the proper circumstances, might set up a Red Cross shelter. And actually, if there's a fire in Topanga, we don't want people to stay in shelter here. We want people to leave as quickly as they can because it's really not safe to be here. And that's a thinking that's changed over the years. To begin with, people were all going to stay defend their property, but now, in view of what's happened in a lot of places around the world, that's not a good idea. In 2009, I was awarded Citizen of the Year award for my work with TSEP and the Red Cross and Meals on Wheels and various things. And so it's a huge honor. It's a Chamber of Commerce, and they do it every year. And there's quite an illustrious group that's been honored. And so it was very fun to go to Froggies, my old elementary school, and to get up on stage and to be given this lovely award. And it's so touching that the elected officials come. It just makes you think, well, gee, here's our government at work, and they really, really care about Topanga, and they want to honor the people who live here and enjoy living here. So it was very nice. In 1948, the year I went to kindergarten, there was a bad fire that came through Topanga, and it burned the mountainside and came right down to Topanga Canyon Boulevard, to where my parents' property is and where I grew up. I happened to be up in my grandmother's house. She and Grandpa lived on the property, and I was having a nap, and I remember waking up and going out on her deck and looking across, and I could feel the flames. I could feel the heat from the flames up at the top of the mountain there. My parents decided that my mom would take the children and Grandma and us out to safety and go to the valley. Dad hitched up a box trailer to the back of the car, and they threw all sorts of stuff in, and Mom and the kids started up the canyon, and they got up to where the community house is today, and the road was closed because it was too dangerous. The fire was up in that area. I remember her not having ever driven a trailer before, trying to turn that around, and you can imagine how scared she was and how difficult, and probably the kids were whimpering inside and turning around. And then we went down to Santa Monica and spent the night or two with friends. And my dad and Grandpa stayed, and they spent a lot of time on the roofs of the houses putting out spot fires, and there were spot fires in the property, and they were able to save the property. This was 1994. I was home alone. My husband had gone camping with a friend up in Morro Bay, and the house started shaking, and of course, it was so strong you can't get up, and eventually I got outside, and then I went around with my flashlight checking on all the neighbors, and it was just very frightening. But in spite of all the damage, it pulled the community together, because we had to have a lot of parties, because we had to eat the food before the refrigerator completely got warm and everything unthawed. And so we had no water, we had no power, but we were fine. And people say, well, why in the world do you live there? Well, we love it. So we take the chance, I guess, that something's going to happen, but something can happen any place. To me, the 60s were interesting because you hear about the 60s so much, and it didn't mean a lot to me because I was just doing my own thing. I was going to school, I was studying graduating from high school, going to college, went to the Peace Corps, did my volunteer work, but when I came back, I was totally shocked because the hippies had come in, and I can remember looking just out of my parents' window on Topanga Canyon Boulevard, and there were people walking by in psychedelic clothes, and I'm thinking, holy mackerel, what's going on here? So that was a huge change, and it blossomed into something really big in Topanga, which again, I kept doing my own little thing and really wasn't very much part of. We all need to get along and work together, or we're not going to survive up here. So yeah, and I think maybe it's a little bit more laid back, and people can walk around. Like, for example, I go hiking every day, and so I walk by people's houses, and if they're out, you say hi. We're not so closed behind walls and fences that we can't talk to people. And I think the park is wonderful because that's a free area that everybody can enjoy. And I love walking up there and seeing more and more people from out of Topanga coming to enjoy that as well. And I think that's wonderful. People with children especially wanted to have a library here for them to come to. So yeah, but it's a fabulous idea. We're thinking, why do we need a library? We got one in Woodland Hills. that, I mean, everybody loves it, and so it's so nice to have it so close. I just think I'm really lucky as a child to be born into this community and to have been able to spend my adult life here. And yeah, anybody who can live here is very lucky.
Got the sunlight in my pocket, got the wind around my hair, like a picture in a locket, jeweled a memory to share. Got the twilight falling on me through Topanga sycamore as the road leans up to meet me. Afternoon closes the door. Ever blessed to be here, living close to nature's core. Meadows melted into moonlight. I could never want for more. And I could never leave here. Even death knows no demise. For heaven's captured in Topanga, this wondrous place, a paradise. This wondrous place, my paradise.